Well, welcome this evening to all of you that have joined us for Wild Harvest, foraging edible plants around you. Yes, so in addition to tonight's presentation, we also have created a list of resources, and you will be getting that as well as a link to this recording. So if for some reason you have to duck out a little bit earlier, or you want to share this with your family a little bit later, you will be getting a link to the recording as well. Next. All right. So for those of you that have attended any of our G3 Green Gardens group, you will be familiar with this idea of the watershed approach to landscaping. And foraging falls under the umbrella of the watershed approach to landscaping. So first off, a watershed is defined as an area of land where all of the water that flows over it or drains under it goes to the same place. So imagine you've got your mountains, the rain falls on it, makes its way down into a river or a stream. All of the water that drains into that source is considered its watershed. And what we want you to do is to take that idea and apply it to your own homes. So imagining that the top of the roof is like the top of the watershed, the street is like the bottom of the watershed, and then everything in between those is within your capacity to change and improve. And regardless of what you are planting, whether it's trees or edibles, shrubs, ornamentals, all plants will benefit from the philosophy of this, or all gardens will benefit from this philosophy. So the four key principles are: one, we start with that growing a healthy living soil sponge. So that is improving the quality of your soil so that when water is applied, either rainwater or irrigation, the soil can hold on to that water and then release it to the plants as they need it. Number two, selecting climate appropriate plants. So we will definitely be diving into that topic with a conversation about foraging. Number three is holding on to rainwater. So we lose so much rainwater, it runs out into the streets and then out to the oceans. What can we do, whether it's simple or more complex, to be better at holding on to the rain in the garden? And then number four, looking at irrigation as being supplemental. So moving away from the default that if we have plants, we have to have irrigation. That's not the case at all. And if we're good at improving the quality of our soil, bringing in climate appropriate plants, holding on to rain, then our need for irrigation will start to shrink over time. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our expert. Before I do, I'm going to go ahead and read her bio, and then we will be off and running. So Michelle Renaud discovered her love for the outdoors in childhood, while she helped her parents in the garden and went rock hopping in creeks. She shared this love with others as a nature camp counselor in her college years, and then later as a volunteer outings leader with the San Diego Sierra Club Wilderness Basics course. In 2015, she earned her California Naturalist certification and co-created the book, The Wild Edible Salad Guide: How to Harvest, Assemble, and Eat a Wild Salad in Southern California, with Michelle Howard as their capstone project. Michelle has witnessed the positive difference that nature and time spent outdoors makes in the lives of people of all ages and backgrounds, and is inspired to continue learning and sharing nature connection experiences with others whenever possible. So we are super lucky to have you here tonight. Michelle, take it away.
All right, Marianne, thank you so much for that introduction, and welcome everyone. I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to share with all of you my love of foraging and my love of native plants. I'm coming to you from the land of the Kumeyaay in the San Diego area, and want to acknowledge that because those who are indigenous to my area, each of your areas, are really the ancestral stewards of the land that we are now on. And so in our current day connection to and caring for the land, and the species that are here now, we join them as stewards of the land. So tonight we'll be thinking specifically about our connection to the land around us that comes from foraging and the benefits of bringing that connection home to our own homes and yards. So the puzzle pieces for tonight take us through the steps of considering first, what is foraging? Then foraging in the wilderness, bringing the wilderness home, water savings and soil benefits, planting your own foraging garden, and the benefits of your own foraging garden. So let's begin with our first topic. What is foraging? Forage is it's a verb to obtain food or provisions from a place, to go searching, especially for food. And more specifically, foraging is the practice of gathering vegetables, fruits, fungi, herbs, nuts, seaweed, and other edibles where they appear naturally in the wild. Why forage? In a world where we can go to the grocery store or purchase our fruits and vegetables through community-supported agriculture, why forage? Well, humans began and evolved as hunter-gatherers. So it's literally in our DNA. Also, in going outdoors, especially with other people, that brings us into community and connection with each other and the land that we're on. And of course, we can't forget that it is simply fun. So with that spirit of fun and connection and it being just a part of who we are, there are other reasons that we might want to forage. It's simply good for our overall well-being. It benefits every single one of our five senses. For the sense of sight, we can think about that one first. Due to technology, our modern senses are really visually oriented and partial. So when I say partial, we spend so much of our time focused in a single location, typically with our cell phones or on our computers. And myopia, nearsightedness, is becoming more prevalent nowadays. So when we get out into nature and find ourselves taking in all of everything around us, it encourages development of our peripheral vision, which is also incredibly important to our nervous system. And having those, both the focused and the peripheral vision work together is how we become the best humans we can be. Also, it benefits our hearing. In our day-to-day lives, when we're indoors, maybe at the office, sound often comes to us from just one source. And when you get out into nature, it's the best surround sound ever. Nature allows us to listen to sounds close to us, far away, in front of us, behind us, and even listening for the softest sound and the loudest sound. And in fact, that is an exercise if you ever need to ground yourself, going out and listening in all four directions, just as I just described, is an incredible tool to have. Touch. All of our tactile capabilities really come to life in nature. Not just reaching out and touching a plant that we might be foraging, but also sensing the wind, humidity, temperature. And when we walk on various types of, for example, dirt, gravel, hills, uphills, downhills, all of that really just wakes our bodies up. Then, of course, the smell of clean air, plants, animals. Hopefully you don't run into a skunk, but dirt and that smell of rain called petrichor, that really brings us alive, all of those. And of course, our sense of smell is so closely connected to our sense of taste. And our sense of taste is the ultimate sense rewarded by foraging. You're not just in a grocery store, but you can walk right up to the plants, smell them, touch them, taste them. And those edible plants around you connect you to the seasons. They're not available all year round. And even your memories. Um, when you come across a particular plant and maybe you haven't come across that plant for a year, it'll connect you right to that last time you experienced that plant and who you were with, what was going on at the time. Um, it's pretty amazing how that works. So it benefits all of our senses and our overall well-being. There's also health benefits of spending time in nature. Nature provides rest and recovery for the prefrontal cortex, which is our brain's command center. It improves our focus and attention. It allows our nervous system to reset. Our cells' electrical pulses become recharged. And as you see in the photo here, direct contact with the earth, all of those bare feet that you see in the mud right there, that really regulates our sleep and our cortisol balance. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that those kids slept very well that night. When we think about foraging and plan to go out to forage, we also want to be aware of the ethics of foraging. There's a concept called the honorable harvest that Robin Walkimmer talks about. Oh, we can't see it through there, but in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And some of the key components of the honorable harvest are listed here. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half so that you can leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm to the plant, to the area, to yourself. And give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. That can be as simple as your gratitude or your thanks to the plant. So these are important to keep in mind when we're out in nature and harvesting. So once you've had a successful foraging venture, this is a photo of the end of a successful foraging venture in the wilderness. So you too can make yourself a salad. And this particular salad was harvested and assembled by a group of fourth graders and enjoyed by a group of first graders. The fourth graders gathered it for the first graders. And I love this note that they left: enjoy thy gift of nature. So that concept of the wilderness that we're talking about, foraging in the wilderness, let's take a look at what the wilderness is and the considerations we might have when we're foraging in the wilderness. Wilderness is a tract or a region uncultivated and uninhabited by human beings. In our world today, there are the many regions that are uncultivated and uninhabited are managed by various entities. It's very rare to come across any piece of land that is not overseen or owned or managed by some entity. So we're going to take a look at who those entities typically are and what guidelines are typically put into place at those locations that are overseen. First one to consider is federal lands. So federal lands are lands owned by the federal government, but they're managed by various entities. I'll highlight 4 of those entities and what their different policies are. First is the National Park Service. The National Park Service parks, approximately 75% of the parks do allow foraging for personal use. Those individual parks that allow foraging set limits each year, and approximately 25%, or the remaining national parks ban foraging altogether. So, of course, it's important to find out ahead of time whether the park that you're visiting allows for foraging and what the limits might be. Next is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, Forest Service. In lands managed by the USDA Forest Service, permits for personal use can be obtained at a USDA Forest Service district office. Permit types, costs, and specific stipulations may vary by forest and region. So again, find out what the specific requirements are on the land that you visit. Next is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They actually provide a searchable map for identifying the foraging locations at the lands that they manage. And if you want to take a screenshot of this slide, you'll be able to visit that link later. Some refuges allow foraging in designated areas for seasonal nuts, berries, and mushrooms. And the fourth that I'll highlight here is the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM. BLM lands are the least restrictive of the federally managed lands. Plants, plant parts, seeds, flowers, and berries may be collected for personal use. Of course, you may not collect threatened or endangered species, and if there's a doubt as to what is protected, that information is available through the BLM. And of course, ask first. Some BLM lands are a little bit more restrictive than others. Next, we'll consider foraging on state parks and public lands. Here, the laws vary by state. If foraging is allowed, a permit is required, and some native plants are protected from foraging. Getting a little more local, foraging in urban environments. So county parks, city parks, neighborhoods, these are the lands that are all around us on a regular basis. The laws can vary for each location, so you'll want to find out ahead of time what is allowed. And here there are some potential risks that don't necessarily exist at the other locations, such as the quality of the soil affecting the edibility of the plant, any pollutants that may be present, or pesticides. So with that being said, let's take a look a little bit at some of the risks or hazards that can be present when we forage so that we can simply be aware of them. I've broken these out into the list of don'ts and the list of do's. So first we'll consider the list of don'ts with regard to potential hazards of foraging. Don't harvest near a road or heavily trafficked area. Don't harvest from areas that may be polluted or sprayed with herbicides or pesticides. And don't trespass. You want to make sure that you have permission to harvest from the land that you're harvesting from. With regard to that second bullet point, the photo you see here was taken in the spring down a road that I frequently drive on. And I was starting to get excited about foraging again because springtime, new plants. And I had realized and known that there is spraying that's done for various weeds and other purposes around the area. But this particular day, I actually, lo and behold, came across the gentleman that was doing the spraying. I asked him permission to take this photo for this presentation because it's a perfect example of what is often done but not noticed by us. So a good visual to be aware of that this does happen, and it's a reason why you should not harvest directly from the sides of roads. Now we'll consider the do's, and you can probably see what's coming by the photos. Do learn the likely hazards in your area and what to do if they're encountered. This can include rattlesnakes, poison oak, unstable cliffs. It really depends on the location you're in So you want to find out what you might run across while you're out foraging. Bring your awareness. All of those senses that we talked about earlier, use the fullness of your senses to really take in everything around you. Then proceed with caution if you have food sensitivities or allergies. When you're out in the wilderness, that's not a good time to try something that you have never tried before if you think you might possibly have a reaction to it. So use your own judgment on that. And of course, identify before you eat. Do identify before you eat. There are dangerous plant lookalikes out there, and through the rest of this presentation, I will share a couple of those that you might run across. Please be aware that those exist. And there's a phrase, when in doubt, leave it out. This is so important. If you have any doubts whatsoever about your personal reaction to something you might eat or the identity of something you might eat, it's better to not try it. So do err on the side of leaving it out if there is any doubt. Couple more do's. Do drink water, wear sunscreen, and wear comfortable shoes because believe it or not, the top 3 hazards you might encounter have nothing to do with the rattlesnake. They are dehydration, sunburn, and blisters. So those are the items you want to be most aware of. A couple of dangerous plant lookalikes that I was talking about. On the left, we have sweet fennel, which is edible. It's a non-native that you might come across. It tastes like licorice. Every part of the plant is edible. Super yummy and refreshing. And then on the right is poison hemlock, common poison hemlock. Poison hemlock looks a lot like sweet fennel, but with white flowers and purple spots on the stems. All parts of poison hemlock are poisonous. So this is not one that you want to confuse. Another couple of plant lookalikes. On the left, common mallow, which is great to eat. It's great in salads. It even has benefits for your stomach, the lining of your stomach. And there, you can cook it, you can eat it raw, a lot of things. On the right is castor bean. And although, of course, you've heard of castor bean or castor oil, which is processed, and there are certain applications for that, if you run into the castor bean plant out in the wilderness, you should not consume it. Those little seeds that are in the middle of the right picture, as few as 2 of those, it has the potential for killing a human. So you definitely want to be aware of the difference between these. The young leaves of the castor bean can resemble common mallow. And once you have successfully become familiar with enough edible plants that are out there, you too can assemble a salad that looks just like this. This was assembled with the help of my nieces and nephews. And we got this all together. And then later on, when we were finished, brought it home to enjoy with dinner. That's my niece bringing it home. So speaking of bringing it home, our next section will talk about bringing the wilderness home and what it might look like to plant your own edible garden and grow some natives at your own home. With this, tame or wild, on the one extreme, you can create a very tame garden. On the other extreme, you can create a very wild garden where everything really is mixed, intermixed, and mingled. This photo here is an example of a permaculture garden food forest. And this is definitely toward the end of the wild, or toward the wild end of the spectrum. In this type of a planting, all of the plants are they have symbiotic, interdependent relationships. They help each other grow. And on the other extreme is something more like a box garden. And here you have separate compartments for each plant that you might want to grow. Depending on your preference, there are many resources available for either end of the spectrum or somewhere in between. These are just a couple of resources that I've come across. And here I want to share a fun fact that I did not know this until I was putting this presentation together, and I thought it was pretty fun. Did you know that Walt Disney's theme for Tomorrowland was agrifuture originally? When originally complete, every single plant in Tomorrowland was edible. And that's both Los Angeles, Florida, and I'm not sure of their other locations, but definitely those two. And today, about 80% of the plants are edible and harvestable. Walt Disney thought of having edible plants around us as a futuristic concept that he wanted to work toward, which is why he put it in Tomorrowland. So thinking more about having plants around you, edible plants around you, native plants around you, we want to think about the land that you might have. So at your house, at your condo, at wherever you might live. Here, this is a photo of this is my parents' side of their house. And they decided they wanted to replace the junipers on the left side of the driveway with native plants, some of which would be edible. So they looked at the area and wanted to think, okay, well, what is working and what isn't working? They realized that right toward the back of those junipers up against the house, they had a contract with a pest control company and they had put rodent bait boxes back there. And so that introduces herbicides and pesticides. So the first thing was to remove those rodent bait boxes. Then they waited a year. And after the end of that year, they installed an owl box in the backyard. They waited and hoped, and sure enough, some barn owls moved in. And then they went ahead and did the planting of the native plants, including some edible plants in the front yard. After everything settled a little bit, we decided to check on those owls, and they were absolutely doing their job. This is just a great example of how you can shift things at your own property so that a more integrated pest management approach can help the health of your plants, your health, and really just benefit the wildlife around you. Another approach, if any of this seems a little bit daunting, you can start simple and small. I came across this photo on a California native plant page on Facebook and reached out to the person who shared this photo, Carolyn Tamor, to find out a little bit about her approach. And she was so excited because she had visions of transforming her entire yard, one side of it into native plants, the other side of it into edible plants. And she wanted to just get started one patch at a time. So you can clear a small area of grass and weeds, here she planted yarrow, California poppies, and native clover, and then let it do its thing. Let the natives take over in their own time. Keep clearing some of the plants that you don't want there. And she shared with me that over time, the poppies took over more than anything else, but she was thrilled. And then she was able to continue on and change out other sections of that yard. When you bring the wilderness home, plant native plants, native plants that are edible, there are water savings and soil benefits that you'll experience, that you'll realize in your own yard. With regard to water savings, benefits of native plants is that once they're established, no supplemental irrigation is needed. They're climate appropriate. They co-evolved with all of the local native plants and animals, insects in your area. So they are literally the perfect plant for your yard. Also, I want to encourage you to consider leaving what we refer to as weeds. And I'm going to introduce another perspective on weeds. First, complex ecosystems are far more resilient and beautiful than a monoculture of turf. So when you think about converting maybe a lawn, weeds can absolutely be beneficial toward that end. Weeds are considered weeds because they are simply a plant growing where it is not desired. But if we shift that perspective a little bit, weeds are also a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. Of approximately 250,000 species of plants worldwide, about 3% behave as weeds, or plants that we don't want in cultivated areas. But weeds aren't inherently bad. Many of them stabilize the soil and add organic matter. Some are edible to humans and provide habitat and food for wildlife too. So let's consider the term forbs. Forbs are herbaceous broadleaf plants that are not grass. Many plants that are thought of as weeds can be called forbs. So moving forward with that, many of the native plants, like buckwheat, California buckwheat shown here, and even some non-native forbs, formerly thought of as weeds, can improve the soil. Buckwheat can improve the topsoil health by making it easier to absorb water, encourage the formation of beneficial microbial soil food webs, and improve the phosphorus content for future plants. Mallow survives exceptionally well in compacted, poor quality soil, and its longevity over time improves the soil quality. Dandelion is helpful in breaking up compaction. They put down a deep taproot that pulls the nutrients up from deep in the soil, making those nutrients available to the other plants. And then as the dandelion decomposes, they add food, they become food for other healthy soil microorganisms. So just some thoughts to consider about the benefits of what we've considered weeds, what we can now consider forbs. So forbs can act also as a guide to your soil's health. As we noticed with the mallow that I was describing, the presence of mallow can signal that your soil is extra compacted, but then it can assist with that compaction. Forbs can also improve soil life in other ways, such as improving the soil pH, moisture levels, compaction, fertility, soil structure, nutrient levels, and suppressing those other plants that you might not want there, formerly known as weeds. So there are a lot of benefits there. As you're thinking about, or I would like to encourage you to think about your own foraging garden and plants that you might want to include in your foraging garden, I'd like to offer some suggestions of plants, but also some great tools that you might use in the process. So where to begin? Well, you want to observe the natural landscape that exists right near your home. You could get out on the trail and start hiking and start logging all the plants that you notice in various areas around you. But there's some tools that we can use that are even more efficient. So if you're familiar with iNaturalist, or if you're not familiar with iNaturalist, iNaturalist is a great resource, not only as an app on your phone that can help you identify plants while you're out in the wilderness, but also when you're home on your computer. You can log onto the website and go over to this Explore tab. And what I've done here is then I came down and chose the map view, and using these kind of lasso options here, I chose a square, drew a square down this area, and this is in an area that's just east of Los Angeles, and typed the word plants up in the search bar. And that brought up all of the plants that have been observed by anyone who has logged any observation into iNaturalist in this location. Then you can scroll through, or even if you have a question about maybe a plant that you're interested in, you could see if it's included. And the idea is that if you live right near this area and then planted some of these plants that show up here, you would have a lot of success in growing that plant in your own garden. Some of the ones that came up here: white sage, southern California walnut tree, canyon live oak tree, and oaks as a general species, and gosh, yeah, over 1,000 more. So this is an amazing tool, and I would encourage you to do some exploring with it. So using that tool and some other expertise, I've put together a group of plants that you may want to consider for your own garden. And in considering these options for your foraging banquet, I will start with the largest, so trees first, and we will gradually get down to the forbs as the last category. If you have space for a tree, plant a tree. There are so many benefits of trees. We'll consider the oak, the pine, and the elderberry trees. Oaks in general, well, oaks are generally divided into two groups or two sections. There are white oaks and red oaks. The acorns, which is the edible fruit of the white oaks, have lower levels of tannins than the red oak acorns. So you may want to consider planting a white oak in your yard. And when I say tannins, tannins are those chemical compounds that are bitter and astringent, and in large quantities can actually be toxic to us. So as any acorn is consumed, whether it's from a red oak, an oak that is in the red oak category or the white oak category, we always want to leach them, which is kind of flush them with water to remove the tannins before we eat them. But we'll focus on the white oak because the tannins are already a little bit lower. The couple of white oaks that I want to highlight in all of North America, the largest white oak is the valley oak, and they have some amazing acorns. And it's just called white oak, or Quercus alba is the most common white oak in the United States. So with oaks, as mentioned, you can eat the acorns. You can grind them and leach them to remove the tannins, and then make them into mush or bread. Also useful on the oak trees are the oak galls. And if you do a little bit of searching online, you'll find out how you can make oak galls into ink, which is kind of fun. And then bark can be used for dye also, and fuel. And for each of these plants that we'll look at the ethnobotanical uses, which are the indigenous uses of the plants. And there are 5 categories that we look at: edible, drink, medicinal, tools and materials, and ritual spiritual. And oak trees check all 5 boxes. So they are incredibly useful. Next one we'll consider is the pine tree. The pinyon pine is most common on the West Coast, and the eastern white pine is more common on the East Coast. The pine nuts are edible. You can eat them raw or roasted. You would typically pick them in about September while they're still a little bit sappy. Then crush the pine cone with a stone or some sort of material, and then get the nuts out from the pine cone. And then, yes, you can eat them raw or roasted, or you can grind them and add them to other flours. The needles can be used for making baskets or tea. And with regard to making tea, you want to make sure that the particular species of pine tree that you're picking them from can or does have edible pine needles. Some of the white pine species are perfect for this. And then the sap can also be used for glue, caulking, things like that. Ethnobotanical uses include edible, drink, medicinal, and tools and materials. Then elderberry, gosh, this is a great one. If you can include this tree in your yard, elderberry trees are so amazing because the flowers bloom right around April or May. And you might be driving along the road and have no idea that there are elderberry trees all along either side of you. But in April or May, start noticing, in California, it's mostly the yellow flowers, but the flowers can also be all the way to the white side. So there is a range of the color of the flowers, but you'll start seeing them pop up everywhere in April and May. And then right around September, October, right before our cold season, is when the berries are ripe. And the berries are really great. They turn them into cold syrup. So our bodies really benefit from them in fighting colds. So the flowers can be used in tea. The berries can be eaten fresh in small quantities. Or if you want to consume large quantities, you do want to cook them. And they can also be dried. And the berries can be blue, purple, or whitish. Ethnobotanical uses checks all 5 boxes: edible, drink, medicinal, tools and materials, and ritual spiritual. Now we'll start looking at plants that are a little bit smaller. I'll go through these a little bit more quickly, focusing here on the large shrubs and the small trees. Some great plants in this category are toyon. Toyon berries ripen in December. Chokecherry. The chokecherry fruits ripen June to September, and so kind of through the summer. And lemonade berry. And lemonade berry is at its peak in June and July when the weather starts getting really hot. So it's so refreshing. We'll dive in a little bit to lemonade berry. The berries on lemonade berry can be eaten fresh right off the tree, or add them to water, put them in your water bottle, or sweeten to taste. The seeds, you can grind them up and use them with fruit for tea. The leaves can be chewed to alleviate thirst. And ethnobotanically, they were eaten, used in water to drink, and had medicinal purposes. I love lemonade berry, one of my favorites. Getting a little smaller, looking at shrubs, we have chia, currant berries, buckwheat, and various sages. With the chia, the buckwheat, and the sages, we're looking mostly at the seeds that are edible. The chia we'll dive in a little bit more on the next slide, but the golden currant, the berries ripen in the summer. The California buckwheat or buckwheat is found all throughout the United States. The seeds are ready to harvest in the early fall when the flowers turn brown. And the sages, or in this photo, the white sage, once it blooms, once the flowers bloom, the seeds can be harvested also again toward the end of the summer when the flowers turn brown. Chia seeds are another one of these amazing foods. They enhance endurance for long distance runners and hikers. They have benefits for all of us. The Salvia hispanica is a close relative of the commercially grown chia, and it can be found all throughout the United States. The Salvia columbariae is found mostly on the West Coast. The seeds can be eaten raw, parched and ground into flour, or soaked in water. They provide, as mentioned, nutrition and energy. You can also take those roasted seeds and add them to flour and bake them into cakes called pannoli. Ethnobotanically, they were edible and used in drink. And you're probably familiar with chia seeds, how they really thicken as they take on the water. Getting a little smaller, ground covers. We have wild strawberry, yarrow, and wild onion. Wild strawberries are often one of the first berries of the season to ripen, so they become that much more exciting. In the spring, when you're walking around and find a wild strawberry, they taste so amazing. Yarrow is best foraged at the height of its flowering in the summer. And yarrow, yes, it is edible. It also has some medicinal purposes. You can actually take a little piece of the leaf, chew it up so getting some of your saliva in it, and then put it on, for example, a sting, like an insect sting, rubbing it on that, and it will do a little bit to relieve the pain and the bump that appears. So it's pretty amazing, yarrow. Wild onion, it blooms early in the year, right after the first rains, as early as February. We'll dive into a little more here. On the East Coast, the most common wild onion plant is the Canadian meadow garlic. In the middle of the US, the most common is the Drummond's onion. And over on the West Coast, you'll typically run into glassy onion. All parts of wild onion are edible: the underground bulb, the green stem, and the flower. You can use them similar to chives or just regular green onions and harvest them after they've fully produced their flowers or the seeds have been set in the spring and early summer. A note here that if it is glassy onion that you harvest, it must be cooked. So you don't want to eat that one raw. Ethnobotanical uses are edible and medicinal. And another on the plant look, or the dangerous plant lookalike category, the wild onion used to be categorized in the lily family because they are so similar, and there are toxic species in the lily family. So make sure that you have a positive identification before harvesting if the plant that you think you're eating is wild onion. Let's give a little love to succulents. I'm going to take a little sip of water here. We have on the left the agave. The photo here is the desert agave, but American agave also grows throughout the US. And on the right, prickly pear. Prickly pear is one of those amazing plants that, we don't want to approach it because it has those spines, but it is so tasty and so good for us. do make sure that if you are going to harvest prickly pear for eating, please handle with tongs and gloves, just regular kitchen tongs. There we go, showing on the screen there, works perfectly until the spines are removed. And to remove the spine, you can simply take, let's see if this one shows up. Yep, a regular Bic lighter and hold it underneath, and the spines will just melt right off. Once the spines are gone, you can eat the fruit. You want to peel the outside and then just go ahead and eat the fruit. There are seeds inside the fruit that are incredibly hard. They will stop up your Vitamix. Don't put them in your Vitamix. They're safe to swallow, but too hard to bite. So you probably want to strain them out. And then the pads can be eaten fresh as they are, maybe just scrape off the tougher skin on the outside. But then you can eat them fresh. You can grill them, which is an incredibly great way to eat them, or saute them, and you've got Nepalese. So prickly pear is great. I love it. You can, or sorry, ethnobotanical uses were edible, drink, medicinal, and tools and materials. Finally, our forbs. We have dandelion, rore or spring beauty, pineapple weed, and common purslane. All of these are incredibly good for you. The entire, all of the plant is edible for each of these. And we'll dive in a little bit to rore or spring beauty. Rore is the updated name. On the West Coast, this plant was known as miner's lettuce. And the reason it was known as miner's lettuce is because the miners, back when they were all headed this direction because of the gold rush, they were getting scurvy. Then they learned about this plant, and it contains high levels of vitamin C. So this plant became an antidote to the scurvy. You can eat the stems, the leaves, and the flowers. Tastes amazing in salads. You may also boil it. And ethnobotanical uses are edible. If you're hiking along, this plant will typically be growing in kind of a shaded area. In this photo, it's up against an embankment and typically not on the sun side, so the side that is more shaded from the sun. So with all of that, let's recap the benefits of your own foraging garden. With your own foraging garden, you eliminate the hazards. There's no concerns about dangerous lookalikes. This is another one that I want to point out. On the right of your screen is blue elderberry, which is edible. We talked about elderberry earlier. On the left is deadly nightshade. Now, while you might not think these two are very similar, as I was out hiking with my youngest niece, we had been eating some elderberries and having a great time. Then we walked home, and on the way home, we passed another plant that she pointed to and said, "Oh, more elderberries?" And thankfully, she knows to ask and check first, because no, it was not elderberry, it was deadly nightshade. So they can look similar, especially if you've been in harvesting mode with your elderberries. Another benefit is freedom from trespassing. You don't need to worry about the rules and regulations around trespassing in your own garden. You get to support and extend the ecosystem where you live by planting native plants. Planting native plants benefits the local wildlife, the bees, and the insects that thrive naturally in your area. You have freedom from chemicals, and your food is more nutrient dense. The soil in your garden, by following these practices, will be healthier and more nutrient dense, and therefore your food and you will be healthier. An interesting study looked at the nutritional value of our foods and soil depletion that has resulted from our farming methods, just modern day factory farming. And over about 70 years' time, starting in 1940, these decreases in various minerals were observed. So to combat this, you grow your own soil biome. Don't use fertilizers. By having native plants, you can use less water. Practice integrated pest management and focus on the nutritional value of your food and the health of yourself and your family. Having your own foraging garden is accessible. It's right outside your door. You can channel your creativity. These were some items that I foraged from a friend's garden back in October, I think. And I laid these out on my table and thought, what can I make with these? And I came up with shortbread cookies with lemon, rosemary, and honey. So good, so fun. And there are, of course, benefits to your well-being, and we can always be doing more to benefit our own well-being. By having your own edible garden, you can get outside and feel the morning cold air and the afternoon sun, and this enhances your sense of aliveness. Time in nature calms your mind and body. And interaction with other than human beings, so the plants, the birds, the lizards, and the insects, increases your sense of connection to all things. And I would like to leave you with this thought to reclaim your aliveness, peace, and harmony. The filmmaker of My Octopus Teacher, Craig Foster, published a book last year called Amphibious Soul: Finding the Wild in a Tame World. And he writes, living in harmony with the wild is humanity's natural state, the state where we are at peace, where we feel most present and alive. And yet so much of the modern world seems designed to cut our species off from the nourishment that nature has provided for all of our existence. So reclaim that nourishment for yourself. So now what? As mentioned earlier, be on the lookout for an email we'll be sending that includes links to some great tools and resources. You can join a foraging group, learn to identify your favorite wild edibles, and please plant a wild edible plant. And I will invite back Marianne.
That is such a wonderful presentation. Every time you share it, my heart just, it thrums, right? We've gotten so disconnected. And I think even in our ornamental gardens, there's this sense that we are controlling nature. And I think that is really one of the beautiful things about this invitation to forage, is it feels just a little bit wilder, like we are stepping beyond the confines of our ordinary life. So it's really, yeah, this is just a very magical presentation. So we did get some questions. We're going to be answering them over the next few minutes. So if something comes to you, the Q&A is open. Well, actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll open up the chat as well. We turn it off during the presentation because it can be a little bit distracting for the presenter to see this stuff like flashing up and down. But I know sometimes people are just more comfortable communicating with chat as well. So we will do both. All right. So, and I know you've talked a little bit about it, but I think one of the questions that feels overwhelming, certainly to a newcomer, is how do I even begin to understand or learn what I can eat and what I can't eat? And I'm wondering if you would share a little bit about how you started to learn. We covered it in the bio, but if there's anything that you'd like to flesh out about, how you learned that you could eat elderberry.
Sure. Um, Got to start with one plant. Um, and I think my one plant when I was a kid was sour grass, and it would grow, Bermuda buttercup, I believe. And it would grow in our neighborhood. And so we would grab a stem and start chewing on it. Um, and then over time, uh, for example, 2015 was when I decided to take the California Naturalist course. And I started learning about even more plants. I also, at the same time, started working with kids in an outdoor program in the Southern California area. And wouldn't you know it, but the kindergarteners could identify mallow. And that was not a plant that I had previously known about. So that was my first introduction, was from the kindergarteners in that outdoor program. And then combined with the California Naturalist course, I started learning, one at a time. And then started learning about the benefits of the plants and realizing that you mentioned elderberry, that elderberry is the sambucus that is sold in our grocery stores in liquid form or cough drops. Um, and yet, when you're driving around, like I mentioned in April and May, it starts popping out and you realize that you are surrounded by elderberry trees that you did not realize were there before.
Yeah.
So just one at a time.
And I think you raise a really good point in that once we become aware, and all of a sudden, instead of this blur of green, it's like, oh, I know what that plant is. And then you start seeing it everywhere. So thank you, because I think that can feel, it certainly was when I started, out as a landscape designer, which was like, I will never remember all of these plants and their botanical names. So yeah, patience and being in community, your next steps were great, to join a foraging group and go out with other people and learn that way. So we've got another question for you. This one just came in, and the invitation is, will be open for the next few minutes. So if there's anything else that you are curious about. This one is, I've been concerned about planting edibles and eating from my yard because we have rats. Do you have suggestions for plants that will not attract rats?
Of course, my first thought is to put an L box up. And the rats will quickly disappear. But in terms of plants that would not attract rats, I would think of something. The rats really are looking for a place to hide and crawl underneath. Um, Maybe focus on the tree. Things are a little bit higher above the ground. Some of the sage shrub type categories. Um, and gosh, we could definitely do a dive into that and do a little bit more research on that probably. But those are my first thoughts there.
Yeah. Also
And
that
yeah,
rats tend to really like places where they can hide. So when you think of like
yeah,
rat heaven, it's things like ivy and lantanas and vincas, where you just get like mounds that they can hide and bury themselves in there. So it may be as simple as looking at plants and you space them just a little bit further apart so that you don't have maybe as much tightness. And they get into fruit trees, they just get in there. But I think Michelle's first idea is what are their natural predators? So the owl box or something that brings the hawks in.
yes.
But yeah, and we had a similar question earlier with termites. So yes, there are the critters out there that we find annoying. There's a great site on integrated pest management. So
Mhm.
well, I'll put the link in the chat box in just a minute, but it is a site where they look at not just pests, but weeds as well. And then they basically have from the least toxic to the most what's the word? Most toxic, I guess. They start out with what is the least toxic, and then you work your way up depending on how serious the problem is. So I'll put that in there, and depending on what your your critter of choice is, they may have some great suggestions for you there. So let me ask you another one. Let's see. Where can we, so some of the plants that you showed us are not something I'm going to find at an Armstrong's. So do you have any suggestions for, like, for example, that miner's lettuce or the buckwheat, as to where, if I wanted to bring foraging into my garden, where I might find some resources for that?
Yes, and gosh, these are on the list that we're going to be sending out to all the attendees after this webinar. Um, and of course, I do not have that list open, but I will tell you, it looks like, we already have people in the Southern California area. So I will mention the Tree of Life Nursery is amazing. They have notified that they will be closing at the end of 2025, which is a bummer, but they are still going strong, and they have classes and plants right now. And in fact, there's a class this coming Saturday that I may be going to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another resource in this Southern California area is there's called the School of Self-Reliance.
Mm,
And Christopher Nerges started the School of Self-Reliance and has published a couple of books on foraging. And each of his books focus on a different region.
yeah.
Great resources.
Yeah, so that's probably for those of you not in the California area, because it's recorded, it will be open to people literally around the world, is to find out or tap into your native plant community. So it may be nurseries that grow native plants, or there may be other organizations out there that are really focused on foraging and working with the native landscape, where you can tap into that community and find out what resources are available.
Yes.
There as well. So great. So I think we have one more, and this one's actually my question. It feels like how is foraging in my backyard different than me growing tomatoes and cucumbers? What makes it wild? Because I love
Mm.
that. I love that idea. Certainly when my daughter was younger, I wish I could have provided that for her, the sort of untamed wilderness. Do you have a sense of how you make that distinction?
You know, that's a great question. And when you plant something like cucumbers or tomatoes, you plant the plant in that location and you know it's going to be in that location. And you give it things that, nutrients for that will help it grow. Working with the native plants that are edible, there's a little bit more of a sense of discovery in that. You might walk out one day and have a plant there that you did not plant and you did not expect to be there. And it adds a sense of adventure to the equation. What is this plant? Is it edible? And gosh, if you find out that it's something along the lines of, mallow or one of these forbs that can magically just appear in your yard, especially this time of year is the perfect time for us to be having this webinar, because the spring is when everything really just starts popping up you had no idea was going to be there. So you discover a plant and dive in and start figuring out what it is and realize that it has incredible health benefits. Um, so it's more interactive. You're not just placing something there, you're allowing what already is in your area to show up and for you to be curious about what it might be.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to say that hearing this presentation makes it feel much more accessible. And I think, for folks that may be joining us who may or may not be familiar with foraging or have never foraged before, just the way you shared the information makes it feel like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. And I think that's really exciting and inspiring, especially if we have little ones, to be able to carefully teach them what they can put in their mouths and not, really reopens or opens the world back up for us. So thank you very
Yes.
much. Is there anything that you would like to add as we wrap up this webinar?
Just that when you start discovering these additional plants that you didn't know before, so you may recognize it, but you haven't connected with it before, and then you start connecting with it, it with it comes a whole new sense of excitement um, that you wouldn't have had just from, oh, there's a plant that just showed up in my yard. It's, what is it? And then by foraging it, you create a deeper relationship to it.
Beautiful. Well, that is a lovely way to end this webinar. So thank you for those of you that joined us live for the Wild Harvest. Thank you for joining us. To those of you that will be watching in the future, thank you for your interest, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a great evening. Thank you, Michelle.